Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is having a fabulous day. It might be a little gray where you're at, but we like that because we're getting into our fall vibes. So, as we let people come in and join us, if this is your first time with us, well, welcome. My name is Sadie Uribe, and I'm the media producer for the Los Angeles Regional SBDC Network. The SBDC is a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, helping to stimulate economic growth through business advising and development. We offer no-cost services to the local businesses through funding provided by the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA, and from the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, Go Biz. Let's see, let's get a click over here. The Los Angeles Regional Small Business Development Center Network serves small businesses throughout Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. And what do? Well, we offer no-cost business advising, meaning that you can meet one-on-one via phone or Zoom to address your specific needs and challenges. And we also offer virtual training and programming, such as this amazing show to help and adapt and grow your business. Oh my God, Lori, did you hear me? I'm like, I need some water, I need some air. Businesses, businesses.
I know that. Hey, Sadie, I just was thinking about something. Let's do an announcement to the audience about the fact that we're working on it, but we're going to have the link that is going to show the shows that are coming up every month. So we've had a couple requests that the Zoom messages that you get say what we're going to be talking about that week. Love to have it. We're not quite up there for technology yet, but we're doing the next best thing, guys. So Sadie's going to put a link in that's going to take you to a landing page, and we're going to try to make sure by the beginning of the month it is updated with all of the people for that month. Keep in mind, sometimes people change, so I can't say it's going to be exact, but it's going to be pretty close. So Sadie just put that up there. You can keep that link and always check to see what shows coming up in the near future. So hello to everybody. Let me go ahead and share my screen. We got a great show today, so I want to go ahead and get started. Classes for the month of October. I was just telling Sadie, I cannot believe October's already midway through. I haven't put the new schedule up for my financial literacy class yet, but I will. And coming November, the legal structure for my company and tax advantages, I'm going to be splitting it into two, where I'm going to be specifically talking about LLCs and sole props, and then talking about being taxed as an S Corp. Lots of information I go through in that class, and there's been more and more questions. So I'm going to try to have it a two-tier focused class. Now, as far as upcoming episodes, we have Belinda Ellsworth coming on next week. She has a system that's called the Four Pillars of Success. And what it does is it's specific to entrepreneurs. It helps you create successful systems, make better decisions, build business strategies. So join us next week as we all learn about her systems and how you can apply it to your daily existence as an entrepreneur. Now, October 30th, we did have a substitution for one of our guests. And so I decided to throw in a Ask Lori Anything. I'm missing the K. It's not showing up, but it's Ask Lori Anything, as Sadie calls it, the ALA or AMA. That's what it is. AMA, Ask Me Anything. And I know you guys love it when we do that. So we're going to have a chat. You determine what you want to chat about. I am the guest. You are the interviewer, and you get to ask me questions. And like I've said to you before, I promise you can ask me anything. I will answer it. You can ask me business, you can ask me personal history. It's a go for you guys, okay? On the Lori's Wisdom, I want to talk about EIN numbers. Most of you are very familiar with an EIN number. However, I get a bit of confusion on this. So we're going to talk about what it is, when and why it's used, and can it be reused? And the answer to the last one is no. And this is where I get a lot of confusion and mistakes that can create quite a legal mess if you do this. So an EIN system is really a numbering system from the federal government. The IRS, and I probably wouldn't be surprising you if I told you this, It doesn't like to bend and amend to anyone. It wants to follow its way of doing things, okay? And so think about the fact that corporations are registered in a state. So if you're in the state of California, you have a corporate ID. 202 begins with an LLC. If you're in, say, Montana, they've got their number system. In Florida, they got their number system. Well, do you think IRS is going to adapt to each state's number system? No. So what happens is the EIN numbers is a long running list of numbers that the federal government has. So when you incorporate, you're registering your company within the Secretary of State of a specific state, you must then apply for an EIN number. And what's happening is the corporate number that you have, and keep in mind, that's called a corporate number because a lot of times you get these forms, they're asking for all these numbers and you don't know which it is. So that's a corporate ID number. That is by state. It gets linked up with the EIN, which is the federal. And I want you to think like these get matched. They're bound now. So you can't just take this EIN and start using it for other things. It is bound specifically to that corporate ID. And also, any correspondence that is then required uses that EIN number. So if you have payroll, the payroll gets submitted to the federal government, the Medicare, Social Security. So it has to have an EIN number in order to be able to have that go through the system or the Treasury and then be in the person's account for when they retire or have Medicare. So that is what an EIN number is. Now, where it gets confusing is a sole prop. Sole props do not have to have an EIN. That's basically been the rule. And so what happens is when there is a sole prop, it's not registered by the state, so it's not a separate entity. It's not a distinct and separate entity requiring it to have its own number. So a sole prop can use the Social Security. So when you file your tax return and you use the Schedule C as a sole prop with your Social Security goes over into the federal government, which it already has. So it has no problem not having an EIN. Now, sometimes people want to have an EIN as a sole prop. Maybe they don't want to use their Social Security on certain forms, or some banks require they have an EIN, some forms require it. And if you have employees, you have to have an EIN. So there's many reasons you might choose to have one. If you do choose to, and you get an EIN as a sole prop, your company is now known by the federal government by that EIN. And you want to use that EIN on state information as well, because that is the identification number. So you say you get a seller's permit, say you get a business license. Another way of saying it is if you're a sole prop and you get an EIN, do not use your Social Security number on anything after that because it is not associated with it and it'll be confused. Now, if you close a corporation, you have to get a new EIN. It's like a Social Security number for a human. Remember, they're locked. You can't reuse it. And I've heard people say, well, I had an EIN and I reused it. No. But unlike a corporation that you have to dissolve, an EIN, you don't have to alert the federal government. They know you won't be using it because the last tax return that you file, you check a little box that says final return. That final return alerts them to the fact that they do not have to look for any future correspondence from you. Now, Francisco says it is advisable to have an EIN as a tax preparer. I just think is it safe to use my Social Security and everywhere? What do you think? Well, if you're a tax preparer and depending on what you're certified as, you would have the PIN number that you get from the federal government. Now, you can get an EIN. I think when it comes to, and your question is really about personal risk. You know, sometimes people want to use the Social Security, sometimes they don't feel like they need to. So, in my way of thinking it is there's no cost or risk to getting an EIN. You just need to know another number and you have to use it. So, as long as you're comfortable having another number in your life and knowing you have to use it, and you have any concerns about using your Social Security number, why not? why not get it? So that would be my answer, because risk is a personal thing. And I try to never say yes or no, because how do I know? I always say it's a risk just getting out of bed in the morning. So who knows after that? Okay. It's hard to say. But there's so many things we have to choose in life. And when we have a situation where we can choose and there's no repercussions the other way, other than just having to file another number, why not? Because we don't need any more worries than we already have, right? That's a given. So, speaking of that, that's a good time for me to start on our guest today. I'm very excited to have Kerri Andersen on. Kerri Andersen is the founder of Beautiful Day Collective. Kerri, as a former Teach for America teacher and a respected social justice attorney advocating for vulnerable for foster youth, immigrant children, and racial equality, Kerri has supported clients through some of the hardest days of their lives. Being exposed to so much trauma and burnout, she saw the need for a nurturing, supportive space to release the grip, learn what well being looks like, and welcome more of what truly brings us joy. I love that word joy. She is now an executive consultant and coach, helping individuals and business center well being to lead happier, healthier lives. Kerri, welcome, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lori. I'm so happy to be here with all of you this morning.
What a fascinating background and a fascinating turn of events. Let's walk back. Well, first of all, let's talk a little bit about the company that you now have. What is the intent of the company? What are the services you offer? What are you hoping to do with your company? Because sometimes I say, what does the company do? But I think in your case, I want to use the words, what are you hoping to do with your company? I feel like that's maybe more appropriate use of words.
Yeah, so I think so many of us create businesses because it's what we want to have for ourselves. I wanted to have a supportive space, especially being a new lawyer, being in such a trauma heavy field. Gosh, looking back, I wish that I would have had someone helping me navigate so much stress and trauma. And I think so many of us, we have, we're such high achievers. We work so hard. Um, Becoming a business owner, wanting to serve your clients, like always serving my clients to like the utmost of my ability. And it's so stressful. And as the older we get and the longer we're doing these things, you might check off all these things on your list, your boxes are checked. And then there's this feeling of, why aren't I happy? What is missing? And so Beautiful Day Collective, it started as Bright Spot, but really it's more than just a spot of brightness. It's really how we go about living our days, because one day adds up to another, and that's our whole lives. So my goal with Beautiful Day Collective is really to support individuals and businesses, companies, by bringing in that sense of well-being, but not in the superficial way. We talk about well-being in so many different ways. And I think being like here in LA, there's things that get coded as well-being that are just, it's just empty marketing ploys, I think, in my opinion. And so my space is really to create an openness. And for me to find that joy, I think it's so important to address the challenges, to have a space that is safe, to have someone listen to the challenges, whether it's in a team setting or individual coaching, where you get to share what is weighing you down, what's not working, what is so hard. Let it out, let that exhale out so that there's room to breathe in so much more lightness and joy. And implementing systems that support well-being, not just talking about it, not just saying, oh yeah, you get a day off once a week or once a month. I'm sorry, once a week would be great. But actually having systems and the way that we do things can add so much more joy to our lives and take away some of that heaviness and that undue stress that we put on ourselves. So that's really my hope, is to really provide this space of compassionate support and accountability, because so many of us just need someone to say, it's okay. Like, you're okay. You can choose not to do that, or you can do this. Just having that space of being held and nurtured and encouraged.
When you speak of safe space, I think that's such an interesting concept. And one of the things that I noticed, and of course, being older, we go through different generational beliefs, right? That's part of the culture of where we came from. But I now have come to realize that throughout my life, even without me realizing it all the time, I had what I would call a low level anxiety, like an energy. I don't want to say anxiety like, I knew I was stressed, but this energy always spinning around inside me with this, okay, we got to get this done. We got to do better. We got to achieve this. Where are we? Are we there yet? Are we doing what? You know what I'm saying? It was like something that was so normal that I never even realized it was there. And I remember reading Deepak Chopra back in my 20s, and he talked about the fact that we find our way of being so normal that when something comes up that could be joy or could be peace or could be a safe space, it seems foreign and we push it away because we're just so used to being in that kind of trauma zone, if you will. Any thought? I know I'm going nowhere with this, but I got a feeling you might resonate with what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think a big piece of that, because I absolutely resonated with that. I was in court 5 days a week as a children's attorney, having so many interviews with children from ages 4 to 21, caregivers, social workers, all of this. And it was so frenetic. And it was so, in hindsight, so stressful and so traumatic. And I wasn't really in my body. And I think that feeling of anxiety, so much about that is that we're not actually here. We're thinking about what's next. We have these pressures, and getting into my body has been so life changing. And it's so simple. With some of it really is breathing. And I know, like, working with lawyers, like, people, it sounds so cliche, right? Where we're like, oh, let's take a breath. No, but like, really,
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
take a breath. Let's breathe in and be in our body and just take a second. Like, we don't have to operate, even if we're still doing the same work, same things need to get done. How we go about it, how we're treating ourselves and the people around us. Because I know, like, for me, I want to create the culture that I always wanted for myself, and I'm sure many business owners want that too, where you create a business, and if you have a team, this is your chance to create a culture that you want to be part of. And I think being intentional with how you treat each other, and then how the systems support that or go against it. Especially coming from a background in law, there is so much rigidity. And this is how we've always done it, so we're going to keep doing it that way. And it's adversarial by nature. And all of that is just such like so stressful on our bodies.
Yeah.
Um,
So, Carrie, I have, before I go too far down, I keep getting interested in other topics, but we have to go back. How did you end up in law? What prompted you to go to school to be a lawyer? Where did that originate?
So I grew up in a small town on a dirt road. My parents still live on that same dirt road. And I saw people being taken advantage of, like low income, not a lot of resources, and over and over. And so as a kid, like, I wanted to fight the man. And
Uh,
and also, like, back then I did well in school. And so, like, there wasn't as much discussion about what do you do if you're like a classic smart kid. Oh, doctor, lawyer. Okay, well,
yeah.
I did. I became a lawyer. But my mantra when I went off to law school was, I'm not here to make money, I'm here to make a difference. Well, Lori, I nailed it. And it was a little naive on the first half. I did not need to include the first half. But that was always my purpose, was like, I am here to help lift up the voices of those who are trampled down. Like, that had been my baseline my whole life. I'd always done community service and been a leader in different student organizations starting in middle school my whole life. So I've always been in this leadership role of do-gooding. And then it gets more complicated of like, what does that actually look like? Like, especially becoming a children's attorney and having to advocate for thousands of decisions about what's best, what's in the best interest of all of these children. It's not black and white, especially when you get a deeper understanding of the systems that operate in our society. When I went into law school, I had such different ideas than when I came out, once I had learned so much more about the oppressive systems that we operate in. And that's a big
You
part.
really do. And it's like I say, God, there's just so many. I've got like directions all over of wanting to go. I have to pick one. So when I went for my enrolled agent certification for tax preparation, I had this belief that I was going to this high level and suddenly I was going to understand that the rules and regulations made sense. They didn't
Mhm.
make sense to me because I didn't have all the information. Then I found out they make less sense than I even perceived. And that's when you suddenly have to, and this has happened over my lifetime, where you suddenly have to go, okay, things around me aren't as I was told they were. How do I nudge myself in what I call the monopoly game? Because I still have to play the monopoly game, but find my peace and happiness within there. And I think that is the struggle that so many, whether you're a small business or not, is trying to say, how do I fit in a world that kind of crazy, not always the best?
Right.
Kind of depressing if you really get into it, but how do I remove myself from this and find happiness and prosperity in the monopoly game? And you've kind of gone through the traditional lawyer that is, okay, you make money, that like check money, happiness, oh, don't worry about that, but money check, right? To now going, well, maybe there's more to this. Does that resonate with why? Yeah, I can tell it already
Oh,
does. Yeah.
so so that's that kind of like rub for my personal story is that I never was the money making lawyer. I was the public interest lawyer. My entire career, I have been in public interest spaces where I am very proud of the work I have done, but it wasn't rewarded with monetary benefits. And that's and even like being a teacher before I went off to law school, I did Teach for America and I was a teacher there and I was a children's lawyer and I've always been in these nonprofit spaces. Um, and that's really challenging too, because I think that sometimes nonprofits can exploit the idea of passions where like, oh, you're doing such great work, but you don't get paid the same amount. When I was a children's attorney, I was the lowest paid person in the entire courtroom, lower than the stenographer and the everyone else because we have transparent California here. So you can see these things and it's like, how, what does that say? And like thinking about our own sense of self-worth, I think that comes into play so much in our careers, in our businesses. We have these identities of like, I am this, I am that. And then what does that mean for us? And like, oh, and we had talked about this a little bit earlier, Lori, about taking a step back. If you've come from a traditional or a specific role and you become your own business owner, how do you shift that identity? How do you go from I am this? And for me, it's like I am a lawyer. And for me, it wasn't even just I am a lawyer. I am a children's lawyer because people used to be like, oh, what do you do? Oh, you're a liar. And I'm like, no, I'm a lawyer for abused and neglected children. And they like, oh. So there's so much social capital that goes into that. And then shifting because, oh, this isn't for me. This is something I chose when I was 18 years old, and I think it's important to understand why we go down some of our career paths, what it is that we're trying to address from our own childhood. I'm a huge proponent of therapy, like thinking about all of this stuff. And then finding those supports along the way that have made it okay to change, that have made it okay to not be okay. And I think there's been a little more of that. I think that's one of the positives that came out of our pandemic times is that at least there was more conversation normalizing the challenges in our lives, that things aren't okay. Not always, but a little more space for that.
Once again, so much you said resonated with me. And Sadie, throw in the chat. I love being okay with not being okay. I think that is a key phrase. But you know, it's funny, Kerri, and I thought about this was one of them I wanted to go back to early in our conversation. I decided what I was going to do at 18 by my parents pretty much helping me to make that choice. I came from a dirt road country family. You know,
Mm,
you worked on the farm, you did cows, that's all you did, right? And my sister went off much older than me and went in to become a medical technologist. And so my parents basically said to me, well, you can go down to the bank and sign on this and they'll give you a loan and you can either stay and pick beans or become a medical technologist. I was like,
mm,
okay, I'll go. And I had nothing I wanted to do. And it was about age 21 after already, going through some of the schooling, I realized this ain't for me. And I always say I had my first midlife crisis at 18. Here's where I want to go with this. You mentioned identity. Now, this speaks to those in the audience, maybe not where they are right now, but also where they could be. During the pandemic, many companies had to close. And they held on to companies because it became their identity of success or failure. When in actuality, closing down, maybe being an employee for a year and starting over with a different business model would have behooved them well. So,
mm,
what I notice across the board from all parts of our life, and especially as entrepreneurship, when we identify who we are with what we do, whether we're in the corporate world, the small company, we don't let new information flow into us. We don't allow new direction. And I think we suffer because of that. Your thoughts on that, Kerri?
I agree with that. I can definitely agree with that because we hold our identity in kind of a box sometimes. Um, and I think that idea of failure is so big, right? Where it's like, oh, well, if I close my business, then I failed at this. And we all work so hard. We all work so hard to create this thing, and it's usually very personal in so many different ways. And I think that just comes from being uncomfortable, getting more comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And the more we talk about it, the more you hear other people say, hey, I had to close my business and it was the best thing for me. Or, hey, I had to do this, or I chose. You don't have to. All of these things are choices, honestly. I mean, some things feel like less of a choice than others, but we still have a lot of choice one way or another. And I think it's empowering to think about it that way instead of like, oh, I can't do this. Like, I'm choosing not to because it lets me do something else instead. But I got off on a tangent. Um, but the identity piece, talking about it, normalizing it, and that's part of what I create too with Beautiful Day Collective is having events, having these group dynamics, because community is so important, I think. And the way our society has gone, we used to have so many more natural places of support and community, but everything has gotten monetized. Like you don't even have a friend pick you up from the airport anymore. You just call a Lyft.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that is truly important to me is creating open, honest, vulnerable spaces for community where we can talk about this, or we can talk about like, hey, this is really scary. Like coming on here today, this is my first time doing anything like this. For those of you who are joining us and listening, oh, this is such a stretch for me. And like my website just got published this morning, hot off the presses. And it's not perfect and it will never be perfect. The idea of perfection, I think, goes into that fear too, where it's like, oh, I have to be perfect. A lot of trauma goes into perfection because
It does.
we think we have to do it right or we won't be okay. That there's some deep running narratives from a lot of it from childhood, from throughout our lives of we have to do it right and perfect or not do it at all. And I've definitely been in that space too. But it's so much better to just put it out there because one little thing can lead to another. So
Yeah.
that's my long-winded answer to that
Oh,
question.
it's so true. There's that statement, paralysis of analysis, right? I think there's paralysis perfection, and that is a issue within itself that you keep waiting for everything to be just right, and it never
Mhm.
is just right in any place, business or personal. One of the things that I feel, this is Lori's issue, and those who follow me all the time, they hear me talk about it a lot. I talk about what I call the Hollywood entrepreneur now. I mean, I've been around a long time ago, and entrepreneurship was not a word really. You had a small company, you used the word mom and pop a lot. They were very respected. And in those days, Kerri, I never heard anything like, all you got to have is a lot of passion and you can do it and everything. So, where I think, and this is a shout out to people in the audience to once again, let's hear people talk about this, is that there has become so much stress upon an entrepreneur and believing that so much has to do with believing in yourself and believing in your product that those words have masked the is it financially feasible? Does this make sense? Can you pay the bills? Is it healthy? And I'm seeing people just jump off cliffs without realizing whether they have a parachute because they think success as an entrepreneur is just about passion and do this like deer in a headlights about all the other things. Once again, not having access to your resources. Thoughts on that one, Kerri?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so much of that comes from social media. And there's so
Yes.
much pressure to have a social media presence. And then what does that look like? And even I think just in all sorts of career professional spaces, there's this idea that we need to look like we have it all fully together. And social media just shows the highlights, obviously, the number of people that are following, all of these things that creates this sense of, oh, I'm not good enough. But that also feeds into like buying more stuff too. Like, oh, I just need this one more thing. Oh, let me just buy this. Let me buy that. And so I definitely can resonate with that, especially the feasibility side. I think passion is just so, I think passion is so overrated, like, especially to make a life on it. Like, oh, be passionate about something that you're not trying to monetize, because I think that that creates a lot of that pressure and makes it harder to let go too when we're talking about the identity and the choices we make as business owners. Like, if it's if it's just a thing that you're trying. I also like, one of my approaches is really thinking about things as exploration. Like, let's just explore it.
Love that word.
Let's try it out. Let's explore. Because one of my personal values and identity is as an adventurer. I love new experiences. I love travel. I love like little things near and far. And I'm really approaching business that way too. Like, let's explore, and even personal coaching. Let's explore this idea. Who do you want to be instead of who have you been labeled as? Like, what are these identities that have been put upon you? Oh, who are you for you? And you don't have to choose these different identities anymore. We get to define ourselves.
Yep. And I love the word exploration. I always think about it. And I have now taken, after decades of having my own company and being around, I now have a different approach that I wish I understood more when I was an entrepreneur. Let me see if I can communicate it properly, and then you can take it from there. I'm going to say that I'm going to begin with the end in the mind. What I'm talking about right now speaks specific to entrepreneurship, even though it sounds like it may not, because what I have available to me today, because of a change in my mindset, is more resources, more creativity, more seeing options, more building blocks like Legos. Okay, let me get into the meat of it then. I started, instead of thinking like, okay, I got to do this, and then I'm going to build the company, and then I'm going to go public, and then I'm exaggerating right now, but that's how everybody, and then in a year, and then I'm going to serve, they go in this whole bit, right? Well, that to me, I realize is a lot of fear-based and society. I remember when I was 20, I had my life planned out till 80 because I was afraid of life. So if I could say, I'm going to do this, this, and this, I have it planned out, right? But instead, and I know this is a cliche too, Kerri, but to be childlike, I have really gotten to the point where I ask myself every day, how can I be childlike? And that's where I like the word exploration. So then I start out and say, what could I experience as a business owner? What are other people experiencing that maybe I could assist in that experience? What is happening there? What is not going well? What is going well? And I just think, as subtle as what I'm saying, it's a huge difference, because one side of the coin is almost like a verbal business plan written for approval. The other side is looking out in the marketplace, looking internal, and finding the match of what you want to experience and what the marketplace is going to allow you to experience. And this part, Kerri, I can't explain, but like I said, I'm old. I've been around for a long time. Once you do that, things just, I'm going to just say mysteriously, I don't know another word for it, but they fall into play. And new entrepreneurs have a hard time getting into that space, using your word safe space again. Does anything I say make sense? Do you get it?
It absolutely does. And I too enjoy, for me, I use the word whimsy. It's like, I like to have a little whimsy in my life. You were talking about childlike experiences, but just a little bit of lightness to it that makes it okay to learn. It's really about learning, right? Is what I'm hearing a lot of what you want to experience, and thinking about it that way instead of here's my hard to-do list and my hard plan. And I also, for me, when I think about that, is I think about connection, because I've had those where like I have just chats with people, and like that's how we connected. Lori is like, I sought out some support, some financial support, and like one thing led to another, and here I am today, right? And I've had that so many times where I'm just curious and I'm asking people about what they're doing and how has it been, and that natural exploration and learning is so much more joyful in this process. And also, one of the big things that I think is so important for us to remember is getting help, like getting any of the help that exists, which is why, SBDC is so nice. And this morning I called up my hosting website, and I talked to tech support for over an hour and just asked all my different little tech questions instead of sitting there turning my wheels, figuring out these tiny little things that would take me so long as not a tech expert. Like, I got the support that was available, and it was so easy, and it made me feel so much more successful just by exploring that, instead of like, oh, I have to do this. Like, oh, let me get some help. let me get some help and see what I can learn. And now I've learned a few things along the way.
And there's just so much out there. And, this just dawned on me, and I could, the audience can tell me on this as well. I might be totally off cue on what I'm about to say, but I was thinking one thing and it led to another. So let me explain. When I was coming up in the business world, especially in my 20s, I was really taught by the business world that I had to be a certain way. And even when I created my website, I was thinking I wanted to have these bright colors. No, you have to use red, you use gray, you do this, you dress this way, you do all this, right? And you got into this rigidity of the way you walked in, you shook hands, you know what I'm talking about, right? And so for us that have had those experiences, we need to learn how to say, no, what do we want to be, and let the business world and customers accept us as who we are. Now, it seems as though, you know how pendulums always spin, and this is where the audience can tell me if Lori, you're off cue on this, but it seems like the people who are following behind, I always forget the generations, they didn't get tied to that rigidity, but they went so far to the pendulum, they got tied into passion without structure, without thought. So it's like we had structure up the you know what, where you couldn't even be yourself. And
Yeah.
now some people are trying to achieve and meet goals without structure and being a little bit too all over the place. And I think the pendulum coming where you have less rigidity, but some structure. And that's where you find the flow and the joy. Okay. So, audience, you can tell me, Lori, does that make any sense? And Kerri, what do you think about what I just said?
No, I agree so much with the structure piece, like having a little bit of accountability. And I think starting your own business, having your own business, you're the driver of all of this. And there's so many threads you could pull, right? There's so many different things you could be doing, and you hear a snippet here, or, oh, you should be doing that, all of these different places to go. And it can be overwhelming. And then it goes back to like like the analysis paralysis of like, oh, and the perfection piece, and then the rigidity. I hear you with that, especially. And a lot of those rigid ways of being are also very much coded for certain demographics, where
Yeah.
it was by certain demographics and it was exclusionary for a lot of us. And so like how do we get to show up and navigate as ourselves in that middle ground, like you're talking about, instead of being so far blobby and not structured at all. And that's again like what I like to help provide, is like that accountability of like, okay, let's check in. Like how are we doing? Let's see where you were, what were the biggest needs, and meeting someone where they are, I think is so important. I think that comes up so much in the entrepreneurial journey, is that we have these lofty goals, or we see all these other people doing this, or what we think they're doing, which we really don't know for sure.
It's so
And
true.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's so overwhelming. And so like starting piecemeal and having someone support you along the way, and bit by bit, I think can be so helpful, and being encouraged, because for me, I had very few entrepreneurs around me in my life. People that I knew in my world, my family, most of my friends have very traditional jobs. And like my dad was at the same job for 33 years and retired from there. And so this idea of starting something new is very scary. And sometimes the people around us don't know how to support us in that, when they want to keep us safe. And I was like, well, don't you want to just keep being a lawyer? Can't you do a different type of law, Kerri? I absolutely don't want to. Like, let me do well-being in the law. Let me help lawyers have healthier dynamics within their organizations and other people. But like, I think that's why it's so important to find these places that are supportive, to be encouraged to pursue these things that are a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, bringing things full circle, where I see it is that first, it's like this huge announcement. Okay, you ready, audience? I've got a huge friggin' announcement for you. You can be an entrepreneur and have joy. Okay, that's the big announcement. You can be an entrepreneur and have joy. But like everything in life, if you don't know how to play the game to a certain degree, and then you don't figure out how to personalize playing the game for you, you end up not achieving a sense of joy or safety. And what I mean specifically, and it goes back to what I'm saying before, if you start if you let the create mind go down the road and imagine, but realize you can only create what you can create now. You may be able to have all this down the road, but now you can just do this, right? So you figure out of all of these things, what can I do now? You
Mhm.
have a consciousness that at the end of the day, where's your financial position? Do you have to buy a quart of milk tomorrow? Do you got money to buy a quart of milk? How are you making money? Are you making money to make sure the time is warranted, right? And then when you lead together with, I want to go here, but today I'm going to focus on this right here. I'm going to structure the day accordingly, and I'm going to make sure I'm getting the financial outcome met because I have not met anybody that is completely passionate and can't afford their bills that's happy and joyful. So I think it's this lovely combination of making sure we have choices to support ourselves in wherever we need to support ourselves financially,
Mhm.
going where we want to go, but not getting caught up that we're not there yet, coming and exploring and playing with what we can do today to give us joy. Your thoughts?
Ab- Absolutely. And I think so much of how I think about intentional joy is saying yes to those little things. Like this morning, I went and put on one of my favorite pairs of earrings. They're little bright pink stegosaurus with hand pressed flowers that I got in a trip to Denver visiting a friend. And like that's something that makes me happy. And when I catch a glimpse of them passing a mirror, I'm like, oh, that's a little spot of joy in my day. And so thinking about the processes where it doesn't necessarily have to be a this or that, where it's just an and like, okay, I'm going to go. And if you have the ability, go work in a beautiful spot outside for an hour. Like use your hot spot. So you go sit somewhere peaceful for an hour instead of staying holed up at a desk every, day in and day out. Having scheduling a walking meeting so that you get to have a little bit of time chatting with somebody. So thinking about how, even if you're not changing your goals themselves or your to-dos, how you go about doing it, I think is so important. How we approach our day, whether that's making that 5 minutes for a little bit of breath work or meditation to start your morning, drinking your glass of water, the little things along the way that help you feel better to have that joyfulness, to have you set up to meet those basic financial needs so that we can survive and pay our bills, like you're saying, that it doesn't have to be such a big deal. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's huge, but sometimes it's these little pieces along the way of someone be like, no, it's okay. You can go sit outside for half an hour and do your phone call that way or whatever it might be.
And what you're talking about now is such an important aspect for entrepreneurship as well, because we wake up already feeling like our to-do list is 4 days worth. I do that all the time, right? But I have noticed that there are choices we can make, such as working outside, going for a quick walk. And because we are our own boss, sometimes we have, just I push myself where I'm like going, no, I got to get one more thing done. I got to get one more thing done. And then I get where, especially dealing with numbers, I'm like, I got a stomach ache. I've got to just walk outside. And where I'm going with this is we take as entrepreneurs, if we're very big achievers, we go, okay, well, we don't have an hour to meditate, but meditating can be just turning your chair for 1 second and taking a deep breath and letting it go. I have learned over the years the power of the breath, not to sound cliche, but oh my God, it makes such a difference to just get up and stretch, to just get up. And, sometimes what I will do on very stressful days is I will get up and I'll just dance around for 2 seconds, just the body moving, because the motion can create an emotion. And what happens, and a shout out to anybody who feels this in the audience, sometimes you're like so intense that you close the space, you close the energy around you, you're thinking, you're focusing and all this. And suddenly you don't realize if you could see your energy field, it's like right here and you've got to expand it. And once again, I come back to I do this because I want sources, I want resource, I want more information coming to me. I want to see new choices, I want to see options, I want to see it. And when you're closed like this, you don't see it. So I think joy is a word that's overused as well. We don't know what
Mhm.
joy is. I think of, and I'll let you tie everything that I just said together with joy. For me, I know I'm in joy when I'm engaged in something and I'm not aware of anything else going on around me. Like right now, I'm experiencing joy. I'm having a conversation with you. I got the audience there. I love my show. I'm just so engaged in it. I don't have an awareness of anything around me. That to me is joy because I'm present.
Yeah, yeah, it's the flow state. It sounds like you're talking about that flow state
Yeah.
where you're not worried about past mistakes, you're not worried about the future, which is where our anxiety comes from. It's just being ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
And I fully am on board with the breath. I think taking a breath, like I invite us all, let's all do it right now. Like everyone who's listening, let's all
Right.
take
Let's
a
do
nice,
this.
let's take a nice deep belly breath and just fill up all the way and then release it. Ah,
That makes such a difference. It just,
doesn't
it's
it?
always amazed me. I mean, people have said it for years, and I've been one of these long decades trying to meditate. And then when I finally realized it's just conscious breathing will
Hmm.
change your state. And I really do feel, in fact, one of my expressions I say all the time, I picked it up from actually a cartoon a long time ago. I always say that there's magic fairy dust in my world. I say it constantly. I always say there's magic fairy dust in my world. But I think just saying that, what I do is when I get in a situation I'm trying to figure out, I just see magic fairy dust flowing down on top of me and go, what am I not noticing? What am I not seeing? How can I look at this different? What other options can I have? I think the power of those questions is very engaging to look at things
Hmm.
differently. And that's what we are
Yeah.
with entrepreneurs, is looking at things differently.
Yeah. And what you were talking about with the different, the state, I think of them as state breaks where you take a state break from whatever you're like hunched over in or like banging out or that stressful thing. And we take that little bit of a state break. And if you're the dancing out, I have a reminder on my phone for a little quick dance party, like randomly each day. Don't always take it, but at least like, oh yeah, that's a reminder. That's a thing I can do. Uh, it helps us release that little bit of stress in our body. If we like shake our body, animals naturally shake to finish out like their stress response.
Yeah.
And these different things that we can do within our body to let that stress go. The breath helps relax our nervous system. Being with other people, that co-regulation, so finding those safe spaces where you do feel like seen and valued and everyone, you can have that shared co-regulation, huge, so that it helps us be more productive. That's the thing, is like when you feel that clarity and you let that little like I like and just a nice deep breath, I feel a little more renewal just from that one breath, let alone like all the others. It helps us get right back in, or maybe with that fresh perspective, like you're saying, when we've taken a step back and we're back in our bodies and we can have a fresh perspective to it, I think is so important with the joy. And when I think about joy, I think about a sense of awe, like my highest moments of joy. I think there's different types of joy. It's not always going to be this awe inspiring moment when like I see a beautiful, there's been some good sunsets lately. So I've been like taking sunset walks and like taking my breaths and sitting underneath. There's these big trees over a ledge that I love. And that's a moment of joy, but it's a quiet joy. And then there's louder joy, and there's all different layers of it. And I think finding out what it is that resonates with each of us individually and adding those whenever we can. I take the exit over the Colorado Street Bridge here in Pasadena whenever I can because I find it just a little more charming. And I'm like, oh yeah, Kerri, you deserve that. Let's take the bridge exit. It's like 20 seconds longer. Just saying yes to those little things where you're like, oh, I do love that. Let me turn on the music when I'm in the shower today. Let me, oh, let me use my favorite mug, my favorite seasonal mug, whatever it is that's like, I know that little thing makes me happy. Let me do that for me.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the big elephant in the room. Okay.
Oh, what is it? What is the big elephant in the
I'm going
room?
to call the big elephant in the room. I'm going to call it the big elephant in the room. It's Lori's big elephant in the room. And I think with your experience of working in the trauma situations, this may come together. You can tell me if it makes sense what I'm saying. So it goes back to something I alluded to before about people not being conscious of whether their business model is financially feasible or not. Kerri, every day at the SBDC, with the amount of clients I see, and I deal with finance, so that's a whole nother animal, right? The When I finally go through the numbers and get the clients to understand where they are financially, maybe they didn't know to the degree my experience and expertise could alert them to it, but they weren't ignorant of it. They had a feeling things were not
Mhm.
going right. They knew things weren't really where they were, but they choose to be what I call delusional ignorance. And I
Mhm.
always say delusional ignorance. And what I mean by that term is not being ignorant, it's meaning I don't want to face it, so I'm going to just pretend it doesn't exist and keep going. Carrie, I think that delusional ignorance is a stealer of joy. I think
Mm.
it leads us to
Yeah.
not achieve our goals because life is not perfect and it's not pretty and happiness is not perfect. And so whatever is happening positive or whatever word you want to use, our company has this, we have this, and we you have to kind of go and go in and out. And so maybe this product's not working that you're in love with and you have to choose this product instead. Maybe you have to pivot, maybe you have to go a new direction. Maybe you have to get a part-time job for a while to supplement your income because your company's not there and not going to be in a while. So I'm just giving you examples for clarity of what I'm talking about. The entrepreneurs don't want to choose that. They want to instead just put their head down and pretend it doesn't exist. I really do think that this is as much of a story of success as any, and that is looking at what is honestly, realistically going on, facing reality, take whatever happened and say that happened, but dealing with it today for a better and more successful tomorrow. I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah. We we know when we're ignoring something. Like I can think of when you started talking about that, there's a couple of things that popped right into my head where it's like, oh yeah, that's a long-standing thing that like I've kept my head in the sand about intentionally. And I feel bad about it deep down. Where like
Yes.
deep down there is a sense of guilt, probably wrapped in a little blanket of shame, because you know that it's a thing you're avoiding. Like we are avoiding finding out those information, like we're avoiding the details, we're avoiding facing it, maybe we're avoiding a conversation, maybe we're avoiding dealing with somebody. And it's stealing our thoughts, it's stealing our space within ourselves. And I think so much of that is about confronting it, which is
Mm.
so scary, right? It's so scary. And that's why I think getting help has been tremendous for me on these different areas and practicing and thinking about it as practicing. Because maybe you don't tackle that one really big thing right away. Maybe you start with another one where like, okay, I know this is the thing I need to deal with. Let me open up this giant can. I guess this would be my can, my giant can of worms
Yeah.
and like dig around. And I think that there's so much relief when we actually face it, like addressing it. Okay, let it go. Pay off if there's like a bill. Like the last time I got a parking ticket not that long ago. And my new way to approach these things is like, oh, I was in the wrong. Like I was trying to get away with it and like it was quick, whatever. And I just paid it immediately because I didn't want to have it sitting on my desk feeling bad because like I did something wrong. I need to deal with it. Just took care of it and it's gone and it doesn't matter anymore. And I think addressing these things is so helpful and getting help if you need it. Like getting someone to help you, getting someone to answer your questions. Cause some of it is like, oh, I didn't know it was all about that. Like I reached out to you with questions or like, oh, I had no idea what I was really doing on this front. And that's okay, and I was able to finally address it and make the changes. And it was such a relief. And that's so much about what I believe in. It's that release, it's the releasing, it's acknowledging it. Sometimes it's crying about it, feeling it in your body, doing something if there's something to be done, and then taking that inhale again and creating that new space for what's next, bringing in a
You know,
little bit of joy.
it's so true, and while you were saying, I reminded me of a situation and, going back to the concept of when you face reality, whatever you have to do next, and one of these things mystical, I don't understand it, but the doors that open up take you exactly where you should be, and you experience what you wanted to experience, but you didn't even know you wanted to experience that, right? But I remember my first company, I started like 25, and I was just committed that I had to keep going, but I really got to a point where I was not happy running my company. But of course, no, I didn't tell myself that. I was that, I thought that. And I'll never forget one of these days I was probably about no, I was about 30 years old and I was so stressed. And one of my friends was a massage therapist and said, come over, I'll give you a massage. So I'm sitting on her massage table and I feel like, that was almost 30 years ago, Carrie. I feel like it was just yesterday because it was one of those defining moments. And I started crying. And she said to me, and she didn't say it to be mean, she said it was like a known fact. She goes, "Well, you know, you hate your company." And I no, I don't no, and the way she said it so matter of facting, like, the streets over there, it was such a wake up, and I realized I had been lying to myself for a year because I
Mhm.
was supposed to succeed, and after that, within a month, I took off, I moved to California, I wanted to be more into hiking, I wanted to be in the mountains, I got into another career, all the things happened, and I had been lying to myself forever, and I remember when I was getting ready to drive to California, I said to myself, what if I had told myself the truth? How many better relationships would I had because I wouldn't have been focusing on trying to make the company work when it wasn't working anymore? How much would I have enjoyed life? How much did I give away? That is a memory that I hold dear that I try to share with every entrepreneur today. And I'm not saying that means shutting your company down, but it means an awareness of how it is working for you personally, professionally, financially, and knowing you can always make a different choice.
Yeah. Yeah, so powerful. Like it's our choices. So much of what you said, it made me, I recently helped lead a cohort for attorneys implementing well-being into a variety of different legal organizations. So huge national firms down to solo practitioners, whole variety. And one of my I led them through just a little guided meditation about imagining what life would look like if well-being was really centered in their organization or in their lives, and like really guided them through it. And afterwards, it's like, so what came up for everyone? The very first comment someone said is, well, I wouldn't be a lawyer, so I just drew a blank the whole time. And someone else is like, I hate leading a law firm. I love being a lawyer, but I hate being the leader of my firm. And so like, oh, like, okay, great. That is such important information for you, because trying to implement well-being into your organization isn't really going to do anything if you hate what you're doing. Maybe there's
Right?
a way to hate what you're doing less, but maybe it's also you need to step away and do something else, and that it's okay, right? It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to do something new. If you would have stayed with that business you hated, what would your life be like now, right now, right? When you think about that, like
Oh,
I
oh,
can't imagine how miserable I would be if I would have never left one of my earliest super traumatic roles. Like I can't even imagine.
and I think the really the summary of it is just getting up from the chair you're sitting in a new chair and asking, how good can it get? And what would it look like? And having the freedom to explore it in your mind and then giving yourself the right to choose whether that's continuing the path exactly, continuing the path slightly different,
Mhm.
and it's not always like just because it's the way it is now, down the road, it might be something else. So I think it's going back to the creative nature of the human spirit, knowing that there's a million ways to make money. When we grew up, you were a lawyer, you were a teacher. No, guys, there is a million friggin' ways to make money now. The whole world, since, I was a kid, to me is a friggin' playground now. It wasn't the playground it was then. So what I'm saying to all the entrepreneurs out there is the world's a friggin' playground. Let's play.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because that's a message that I need to keep hearing over and over for myself. Like I need to remind myself that. And also I think it's important to define success. And I think that goes back into identities. Like that sense of identity is so important. What does success look like for me? What do I do as whatever my identity is? And I think that helps build your intentional joy into your day. So when I
Yeah,
think about myself as I am a person who centers my own self-care, my own self-compassion, that changes how I go about my whole day. And it might
yeah.
not change my actions, but it might change how I'm talking to myself in my head. Or when something like, ooh, I make a mistake, like, oh, like how I talk to myself about that is
Yeah.
fundamental. And all of that goes into our joys or the lack thereof when we beat ourselves up and don't
Yeah.
have the space to just enjoy a little bit of like, oof, well, I did it and it's done. Like, you know, letting go so that we can take in more of what feels better.
I sometimes I can get going on so much in my head. I always kid around. I go, I filed a divorce from myself, and the judge said it was a conflict of interest, and I had to work it out. like, and the other thing I've been really, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but for me, I now don't ever say I am anything, because I realize
Mm.
every time in my life I said I am, I held on to it. So I was like, well, what am I? And I'm like, Ma, here now. I'll go with
Mhm.
that. I am here now. I don't say I am a consultant. I am this. I am that. I consult.
Right.
I teach, I know finance, but I am here now. That's all I can
Yeah.
commit to, is here now. That's it. And
Yeah.
so, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I just wanted the entrepreneurs and our audience to hear a discussion that lightened things up, told them they had choices and options, and let them be childlike and joyful and having fun. Last words you'd like to leave with our audience?
Well, I would love everyone, those of you who are participating in the chat, tell me what's your bright spot today? What's something you're going to do for your own intentional joy? All of our listeners, think about that. What is it that you can do? One little bright spot for your day to have a beautiful day today.
I love that. I love that. And Sadie, I know that you have put Kerri's information into the chat. And if someone wants to work with you, they just contact you. How do they know what type of classes or programs? I'm using words, not necessarily your words, just so you understand what I'm talking about. How can they get involved with you to have an ongoing conversation like we're having?
Yeah, so it all just starts with one conversation. Whether you're looking for individual coaching, you could use a little individual support. If you're looking for strategic consulting or bringing well-being to your team, it all just starts with a conversation so we can see what it is, how I might be able to help have a little more intentional joy for you at this point. And I'll have events later, but at this moment, that is what we are doing for now.
Right now. Oh, I love our comments, and look
Yeah,
at
I love seeing
the
this.
chat. I love that. I like
Oh, a
yard
foam
work
roller.
too. Yes. Yeah, yard work and the foam roller, and I'm gonna play tonight. These are great.
Kerri Andersen for the people. Thank you. I am. I'm here for the
Oh yes,
people.
I love that. I love our audience. We have
Yeah.
so much fun. So Sadie, I'm gonna bring you back to help close us down today.
I just feel zen. That's the only way I can describe it. I'm like, I am so like grooving right now. I was like, yes. I'm like, let me get at all these tasks at hand.
Perfect. Now, everybody, Sadie's going to stay on a little bit longer, so you can get my information, you can get Kerri's information, you can get SBDC information if you need some help from SBDC. Kerri and I are going to close off right now, so I want to thank everybody for joining Small Biz Talk with your host, Lori Williams. If this was your first time visiting the show, please do come back and join us. We have all kinds of conversations on every topic imaginable. And to my frequent flyers, thank you for being there with me every single week, because you know what you guys do? You bring me joy. And I'm just so happy that you're there so I can have fun every week with you guys. Kerri, thank you for coming on and sharing us your story and giving us an opportunity to have a very important conversation, one that will help us all to have a little bit more peace, happiness, joy, and whatever word that you want to use in your life.
Thank you, Lori. It has been such a pleasure. I
Awesome.
hope everyone has a beautiful day today, whatever that looks like for you.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody. I'll see you next week.